that are due are the 2012 NDAA sanctions, which require the president to prevent foreign banks from opening accounts in the United States or impose strict limitations on existing U.S. accounts. If those banks process payments through Iran's central bank, the law exempts those countries who significantly reduce their purchases of Iranian oil from the previous reporting period. Ms. Harman, let me ask you this. How would this affect countries like Japan, India, South Korea, and Taiwan, which have not reduced their importation of Iranian oil?
Well, that's what I was trying to address in my testimony. President Trump could say that he's decertifying the deal today, but he could waive the imposition of those secondary sanctions. I surely hope he does that. I think that would be a better result. But let me also agree with Mr. Rademacher that he had better options. I mean, there's no reason to withdraw from the deal now. There is every reason to work with our European allies who said they were willing to do it on making the deal stronger before it expires. It's not expiring tomorrow. And let me just add finally that Secretary of State Pompeo, when he was the head of the CIA, said that Iran is complying with the deal, with the four corners of the deal. Let's understand, as the Senior Vice President of the Wilson Center, Rob Litvak, who's very knowledgeable about this, always says, the deal was a transaction, not a transformation. It was a transaction to end Iran's program to pursue nuclear weapons for a finite period of time. I wish that had been infinite, and I still hold out hope that that could be achieved if we took a different path.
Well, I would hope that it could be achieved because, as I mentioned before, that was my major objection to the JCPOA, that it didn't really prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. It just postponed it 15 years. In relation to what we just mentioned, if the U.S. were to sanction companies in Asia for doing business with Iran, as we would be required to do under law, how would these sanctions affect U.S. strategy on North Korea?
Well, I think that this action will hurt our ability to strike a better deal, what President Trump would consider a better deal, and we all would, with North Korea, because they're watching. And if they think we don't abide by the deals we make, why would we abide by a much tougher deal with them? And I would just point out that I think it was a front page article yesterday in the Washington Post pointed out how tough it will be to administer any deal we make with North Korea. They have a much more advanced nuclear program than Iran. Iran had 0 bombs. North Korea has, depending on how you count, up to 60. Plus, we should anticipate that they have deep tunnels all over the country, which would be very hard to identify. And our intelligence on North Korea has been extremely poor up to now. We have basically no ground truth in North Korea. So taking this action this afternoon, I think, just made the North Korea deal, which by President Trump's standards would be, and I agree, a crowning achievement of his presidency, harder to achieve.
Let me ask a question about Iran's permanent presence in Syria. Let me ask either Ambassador Bloomfield or Steve, Mr. Rademacher. How would you advise President Trump to approach the crisis in Syria after the fight against ISIS? Without U.S. influence and presence, Iran is likely to benefit, yet the administration, in my opinion, appears to be handing Syrian territory over to the Assad regime, negotiating de-escalation zones on Israel's border that could give Iran a permanent presence in Syria, and how would a permanent Iranian presence in southern and eastern Syria affect U.S. interests in the region and affect Israel's interests in the region?
Thank you, Ranking Member Engel. The first point I would make is that the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, dealt solely with the nuclear sector. And at a time when President Obama thought that the Iranians wanted to turn a page and reform, they didn't pay much attention to the human rights abuses at home that you mentioned and the activities in the region. 5 years have passed, as I said. It's time to look at the non-nuclear side of Iran policy. In Syria, what has occurred is nothing short of the greatest war crime of the 21st century. Iran's Quds Force commands militia that I would estimate at 60 or 70,000 inside Syria, of Shia militia from several countries. The payroll comes from Tehran. The command comes from Soleimani. And so he has 80,000 in Iraq as well. We've never addressed this point. I think that what Bashar al-Assad has done cannot pass without consequences. We should be building a war crimes tribunal case against the Assad regime. We should have had a defection program against the Syrian armed forces. We should have been making a lot of noise about Russia's reckless and promiscuous use of weapons that they give to the Syrians to bomb children and women. Over 27 hospitals were bombed when the Russians came in, and a cordon sanitaire around Damascus. Where was America's voice? So I think it's never too late to speak up for what is right, and I think the Europeans would join us in putting together a series of political measures, informational measures, and put the spotlight on Iran's aggression and let the people of Iran know where all the money's been going, because it certainly hasn't been going to the people who are protesting in Iran today.